Hello, welcome to day 3, and so thanks very much for joining me on this confidence series. What we've done in the first 2 episodes is we've looked very deep into performance, and as much as I didn't want to take you on a journey of my neighbourhood, it looks like that's what I've done. I'm at a different side of the beach today. In our first 2 episodes we looked at the inability to perform under pressure, and we looked at that being a preparation challenge. What we did in day 2 was inconsistency in our performance, and recognise that's an embedding of process challenge. We did get a lot of questions yesterday from a lot of you regarding how do you embed, and I'll address that at the end of today's topic. What we're going to talk about today is an issue that we get presented with really frequently, because athletes come to us really quite stressed about continual injuries around competition season, particularly around competition weekends or trial weekends. And whereas what we do as athletes and coaches, it sometimes can be quite dangerous, so getting injured can be just par for the course, particularly in certain sports. What we're focusing on more is the injuries that consistently turn up, niggly injuries around those competition times. But before we talk about injury, let's talk about sickness, because more often than not I see a pattern of athletes when they get close to competition, they'll get sick, they'll go down with the flu, or they'll pick up a bug that's going around, or as soon as the competition is over they're down and out for a week or 2, and that puts some difficulty between that competition and the next competition. What people don't understand is there's a huge amount of psychology around why we get sick around competition time. So we put this in context of our primal survival mechanism. Humans are very, very good when we get put under pressure and our life's in danger. Our brain kicks into gear into that survival mechanism, and it gets very, very clever in managing our body. So if we were running across a savannah because something's trying to eat us, the last thing our brain is worried about is fighting off bugs, fighting off influenza or a local virus that's going around. So what it tends to do is reassign that energy and that resource into getting us across the savannah, getting us out of the way of that danger. So that's actually quite smart. So if we're an athlete and we're preparing for a competition and we're spending a lot of our time in a really high anxious state, then that's going to put us into that fight or flight mechanism, that survival mode that we're talking about. So if we're not managing our emotions, we're not managing our preparation in a way that makes us feel comfortable, feel confident and feel secure, then we're always going to have a higher degree of emotion. And that will slide us into that area of our brain saying, let's protect you. So if you are an athlete and you find yourself frequently getting ill or being run down just before a competition, the likelihood is that's more emotive than who you've been hanging out with. So let's talk about the 2 primary causations to injury around competition time. The first causation is a fatigue-based injury. Now, this is often when an athlete is overworking. They're trying to do too much in preparation because they don't have a very good preparation structure or strategy in place. They think they've got to do more. And sometimes coaches and parents, we can feed that and get the anxious athlete to think, I've just got to do more, I've got to do more. And they start to have challenges around managing their workload and managing their bodies. There's also an athlete will tend to maybe not hydrate as much as they need to. Their nutrition might not be as good as it needs to be. And a real key indicator in our recovery is sleep. And around competition time, we start to see athletes struggle with their sleep as well. We're going to deal with sleep as an individual topic later in this series. But just recognize fatigue-based injuries, those niggles, those old injuries flaring up, are often a result of emotion making our brain kick in and make us do too much or not look after ourselves. The other form of injury that we see is forced outcome injury. Now, this is even more of a mental challenge than the fatigue-based. Fatigue-based is more emotion. When we're talking about forced outcome, it's more process. When an athlete gets scared or gets anxious about a performance, they try and force the outcome, try and get more repetitions in. And what they tend to do is compromise the technique. Now, this has a twofold causation to injury. It's either one, it changes how we do that skill, so therefore it changes the consistency rate of that skill, which opens us up to more injuries, particularly at a higher skill level. So remember we talked yesterday about that domino, tipping that domino and following that blueprint. If we're trying to force the outcome and we try and cut corners in how we get there, then it makes us vulnerable to inconsistent skills. You put those in a routine and again we end up with potential injury. The other aspect of this, of forcing outcome, is when we don't understand our how. So yesterday when we looked at inconsistent performance, if we don't understand our how and we get frustrated because the routine isn't going the way we want it or the consistency rate isn't as high as we want it, we become end step driven, so diving for the line. I've got to get the routine done, I've got to get that skill done. And we forget to focus on the quality. Again, this has a frustrating aspect to what it's doing, but more importantly, when we're talking about injuries, it compromises that technique, and so we end up seeing a rise in injury rate, or injuries that have been there in the past that we're recovering from flare up. So many athletes and a lot of coaches that I talk to never really connect the two. They think that it's just because they've increased the repetition of doing routines or doing skills, that's why their injury's there. But there's a much higher mental input to that and an emotional input to athletes getting fatigue-based and end-step injuries. So if that's you, if you find that either you're getting sick before a competition or straight after a competition, or you're getting an increase in those niggles and old injuries, or you find yourself actually having more accidents in preparation, recognize a lot of that comes down to the quality of your preparation. If there's a really good structural development in your preparation, you're managing your confidence levels, you're feeling comfortable about your how, you'll reduce the frequency of injuries. Again, happy for you to put any kind of comments in the message down below, and I'll address those. If you've got very specific issues, particularly if you're a coach or you're a parent and you're seeing an athlete who does struggle with either illness or injuries right before a competition and you're not sure about why that's occurring, put a message in below and I'm happy to respond to you. We've been getting a lot of support across all the platforms, and we're going to answer as many of those questions as we possibly can. The question we got yesterday regarding the inconsistent performance, I talked about the blueprint that we build, and taking it from our prefrontal cortex to our subconscious is a trust mechanism. And I had a lot of questions, how do you build trust? And that's a really good question. We build trust in, there's a few different ways we can build trust, and it depends on the athlete, and it also depends a little bit on the sport too. But in essence, in general context, number one strategy is recognition and reward. If we don't reward success, we don't recognize we can do that. If we don't recognize we can do that, then we're not going to trust. So that's a very simple thing that you can do. You can build into your journaling each day or your process each day. So recognition and reward. The other more technical strategy that we use a lot is visualization. Now, people talk about visualization and there's a huge assumption that most people know how to visualize. We teach 7 different strategies around visualization. Each one has a very unique purpose, from disassociated to associated to point to technical. There's a whole multitude of different styles of visualization. There's also mental imagery. So that's probably a whole different training all of on itself. But if for those of you who asked how do we embed those blueprints and trust them, they're the 2 primary techniques. So emotional recognition and reward, making sure the emotion's at the end of the process, and visualization. I hope today helped you understand maybe where you're getting your injuries or why you're feeling that your body isn't up to it come competition time. Tomorrow we're going to deal with a really big topic. It's number 4 on our list, and that's fear and mental blocks. Now, in certain sports, I get called in to deal with mental blocks and fear daily. So we'll deal with that tomorrow. If that's you, or you still want to follow on these confidence series, tomorrow, look forward to seeing you, 9:30 here, Sydney time. Please share these videos if you'll find any other athletes you think, or coaches that you think will benefit from this content. Have a great day. I'm just about to go and have a swim. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Take care.